pledge of allegiance. Wherever you are.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Roll call.
Bcsd.
Here.
Jeremy Connor.
Here.
Kimberly Erlin.
Here.
Patty LaFlemme.
Here.
Cheryl McKenzie.
Here.
Ed Marin.
Here.
Courtney Miller. Here. Crystal Palmer.
Here.
Nicole Lepore. Here. Bradley Luckett.
Here. All right. Approval of the agenda. Resolving the superintendent of school recommends to the Board of Education to approve the agenda. Motion, please.
A motion, Crystal.
Second.
A second, Cheryl.
Any discussion on the agenda, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. All right, presentations are next. Yes. You present on this?
Okay, good evening. It's that time of year again where we'll present the budget, and like we've done probably the last 7 or 8 years, business manager is joining me, coming from the softball game.
I apologize.
Don't apologize. Helping coach the team. Good news is we were beating PHS at times. It's great. Try to have a theme each year, and the good news this year is we finally have a path to being fully funded. So that's exciting news. We're in year 2 of a 3-year catch-up, which is really interesting because it comes off the worst year of funding, which would have been 2 years ago. So, or however you look at it, 2 or 3 years ago. So that's really good news, and we should have one more year of really solid funding. It seems like all the budget numbers are exceeding the predictions for the state, and that's good news to make sure that they don't retract on that promise. But when we build our budget, we're always talking about how do we approach this with the end in mind? And the end in mind is making sure that our kids leave Beekmantown Central School District ready to be quality contributors to society itself. And then we look at, let's take a look at last year or this year and see, how are things going and where are the holes or where are the areas that we need improvement. So when I think of the year in review, I think of the beautiful Shine On moment we had where we had the Chancellor of the New York State Education Department here, and more importantly, we had a bunch of Beekmantown students here, and I think the astronauts essentially just Skyped in and engaged with our students, and it was just an amazing day for Beekmantown. And then we were able to learn in person all year, which very few districts were able to do that. And we were able to, once again, have the extended learning time opportunities, and you can see the uptick in those amazing opportunities for kids. One of the new things that we had talked about for a number of years, we were able to do this year through a grant, was we paid for college credits. The kids taking college credits were able to students would take courses that were eligible for college credits, and they may not have the money to pay for those. So Johnny might be taking the course and paying for those credits, but Sam's taking the same course and he wants to pass the course, but he's not getting the college credits. And we know that if you obtain college credits, it begins to open your eyes to the possibility of going to college. Be like, wait a second, so I have college credits, and it begins to start that at least internal dialogue, if not an external dialogue with students. So that was really great. We were able to increase staffing from that more difficult year at the beginning of the pandemic, where we had such a terrible budget run. And we had a very low tax rate. We were able to go back to proms, dances, Molly UN, which we heard about maybe last meeting or 2 weeks ago. Principal Nelson assured us that it was the best middle school dance of all time. This happened last weekend, so kids were excited about that. And then I just wanted to put paid breakfasts and lunch down. I know that's something we've done for a long period, for a number of years now. But in the thought exchange I did, a lot of people were like, don't lose the paid breakfast and lunches. So it's more of a reassurance for people than it is. But there is a budget allocation. There's a makeup in the cafeteria that when we balance the books. So that's part of our budget. But I just want people to know that's not going away. We did again, it's not going away.
Yep, we're going to present this in 3 parts. So we're going to have taxes, supports, and programs. First, we're going to discuss taxes. Will Bcsd exceed the tax cap? And no, I know we've talked about this in several meetings, but no, our tax cap is 2.74, and we are not going to exceed that. Taxes remain under $17 per thousand. For this current year, it was at $16.72. And so we're looking at 22, 23, we'll get to that slide a little bit later as the prediction of what it's going to be. But as you can see, what we're trying really hard to do here at Beekmantown is you see the levy percent change. So you can see, especially in the last 5 years, how consistent it's been, and that's what we're aiming for, is consistency. That's what we want. We don't want these big spikes, as you can see back in, was it 11, 12, and 13, 12, 13, and it was kind of all over the place. You had a tax break, and then you had to increase it by 12%. And what we want is to try to avoid that, because it's not good for anybody, including the school and the taxpayer. So as you can see, last 5 years have been very, very consistent, and that's what we're trying to do every year. And that's done through several different ways. Some things we don't have a lot of control over. Pilots are one that we fight, but we don't always win. But so far it's been very consistent, and that's we're going to keep trying.
Some of the data that we look at free and reduced lunch data numbers, and we've been hovering right around 50 to 57% over the last 10 years. We've had an uptick in enrollment a few years ago, and we are the largest school district in the county. This doesn't include pre-K. We have more pre-K, full-day pre-K, 3s and 4s than anybody as well, so that number grows when you include pre-K. But as you see, Peru's, so this is sorted by enrollment. But interestingly, just our neighbors, but it's interesting to me, our neighbors have been increasing in their poverty rate. So before, most of those numbers were much lower than that, and we were the highest. And now you see how Salem Valley is the highest. It just tells the story of a poor economic outlook, I guess, for the North Country. And certainly, I think BOCES would tell you, because they track all the kids in the BOCES, they tell you that we've lost a number of students across all districts. We are not losing students. We're continuing to gain, but at a very marginal rate. And then the nice thing is you take a look at our tax rate. I was talking to a local real estate person at one of the soccer events this year, and he was saying that it's just exceptionally notable at Beekmantown to see that rate. And when you look at it compared to some of your neighbors, and it's more affordable to pay your taxes if you're in the Beekmantown Central School District. Now, part of somebody might say, well, the assessments have gone up, and assessments have gone up everywhere in the country. Certainly, we're no exception. But there's a high demand to be in the Beekmantown Central School District for the education that kids are getting. But that's it's pretty good information as a baseline. So our financial outlook is really good. As I mentioned before, we're finally getting to fair funding. So when you go back to most of these schools that I just looked at, there's 2 other schools on that list that do not have the fair funding. We'll just call it fair funding. The other districts are called Save Harmless. That means they're overfunded. Some to the tunes of millions of dollars overfunded. So for us just to get to that baseline, we're not going to complain at all. But I don't know what will happen in the future with those ones that are overfunded. But fair funding's great. Grants you'll see in just a minute are fantastic. We have some short-term stimulus aid that can't be. People think that can be spent in a lot of different ways. You want to make sure there's not a cliff that we fall off, because we're more worried about the cliff that other people fall off. So we want to be smart with our stimulus aid and not invest it in reoccurring costs. But we have a very strong fiscal outlook. With that, I'll hand this over to Jen.
So how does this budget impact me? Okay, so this is what I'm predicting at this point. Obviously, as you all know, assessments for homes don't come out until May. So this is a guesstimate that I used with some growth in Beekmantown and Plattsburgh. There's usually very little growth in Altona and Bcsd. So I work with the real property office. They give me an estimate of what they think, but until the assessments come out, and we know we do have a pilot that is going to reduce the Plattsburgh assessment levels. So at this point, my prediction is 1686. This is not a perfect science. There's a lot of variables in this, so we won't have a tax rate until August, a final tax rate. But this is our best guess at this point. Okay.
And that rate isn't set by us. That's set through through other towns and municipalities and their assessments. So our budget is our budget, and our budget is what we pass. They pass other things, other components that end up being our tax rate. So that's why we can't.
Yeah, it's all based on our assessments. So until those numbers come in.
So what pilot are you looking at?
The one that you guys approved last board meeting?
I think is it tax rate or
Oh,
pilot?
I'm sorry, pilot. For the mall.
The mall one?
The mall one, yep. So in that agreement, it went down by
Like $10
million.
$10 million. So let's just talk about that. For Town Plattsburgh, you might say, well, I see other businesses that have been built. There's some over by like the beach. There's a nice, I think, a car dealership going over there. It looks expensive. There's another one over by the fairgrounds, which is actually in our district. It's the Huddig dealership. It's a Nissan dealership. And we don't know when those come on the tax roll. We don't control that either. So those are probably multi-million-dollar businesses. You see new homes being built. But we're still using a growth number for the Plattsburgh, but it otherwise would have grown more had the mall stayed at a similar base, right?
Right. So what I did, I used for Beekmantown Plattsburgh, I used a 2% growth rate as our guesstimate for those two. Altona and Bcsd they usually have a very minor growth rate. So for this calculation, I just left it at the base.
And you'll see other school districts be able to really pinpoint their number because they don't have the variables of growth that we have. You might know that in a smaller school district, there's 3 homes built, and that's the extent of their growth. So it's more complicated yet factor in the town of Plattsburgh. But thanks, Jen. Oh, you're still.
Yeah. So next is grants. As you can see, there are several, which is a good thing. Years back, when I was here for the first time as a treasurer back in 2004, I think we had the titles. So I think there was maybe 6 grants. We had the title grants and the IDA and UPK, and I think that was it. This list is now exceptionally long, and it's over $10 million. A lot of those, the ones on the top, are the stimulus monies, broken out into all the various things that we can use. Some are very, very specific. And this is a lot of work because you have to track where all of this money is coming and going, and it's very detailed. But it's wonderful. There's $10 million sitting there. And the ones on top that are the stimulus money, we've got 2 more years of that, at best. So we need to understand that it's not anything we can use for long-term expenditures. So we have to be smart and wise with that money, because it will be gone. It's just a temporary which we're glad to have the temporary, but we just need to plan accordingly.
Any questions on the grants? We can come back to any slide too when we're all done.
And short-term federal aid. So I just discussed a little bit of that. Like I said, we've got at best 2 more years of this funding. We are doing our very best to spend it wisely and in ways that are helping our students. Like I said, a lot of it's very specific for after school or for learning loss, or there's a multitude of things that we're using it for. So we're preparing for the future and making sure we're using it wisely.
So this is last year's multi-year forecast, and I think we started this 9 years ago, and it was a challenge 9 years ago. Now we've kind of got it down pretty well. I think people usually, I really bring this up for illustrative purposes, people usually worry a lot about the red numbers in the outgoing year. So if you take a look at 21-22, which is this current year, and again this is last year's forecast, you look in the other years, you're like, oh my gosh, we're over $500,000 in the red in the next year, and then 1.2 million in the red the following year. And those are big numbers, no doubt about it. But when you're talking about $45 million budget, $45 million budget, $48 million budget, whatever it is on a given year, that's a really low percentage of the budget. And it'd be kind of like having you budget your house, all your expenditures in your house right now, everything including food, fuel, oil, gas, everything, and be within 1% at the end of the year. It's difficult. But then we always, we know that the funding comes in cycles, and right now we're on that uptick cycle. So this is this year's line, and you see what we've done this year in terms of taking that, projected $700,000, we'll have it down to zero that out, and next year we're only 113,000 in the red. Or the year before, last year we were 1.2 million in the red. And if you go up and you take a look at the fund balance appropriation, which is just below the yellow line in the middle, I don't know, hopefully you can see that. You see we're allocating 2.1 million this year, and then next year it's 2 million. So if you did 2.1 million next year, it would basically be zeroed out for. So that's good. That's that comforting feeling we have if by maintaining a strong budget, and it looks promising down the road. So going through this, we've got through this before, but the final run came in on Sunday during the day. I think it was a soccer tournament. I sent it out to people, and then yesterday we looked at it. So the only increase, there was a significant increase in pre-K money, which is kind of startling to a lot of districts that have had pre-K for a long time, because it's always been a flat number. It's never increased, which is, as all your expenses increased, that number never increased. So now it did. All the districts that had that increase were happy. But you take a look at this number, and you have your revenues up top. I know we've talked about those. We have the state aid increase. You have our shared services and others. So you have in there revenue generators like our special ed, preschool, and maybe Medicare reimbursements and pilot payments are actually just below that. And then you keep going down, and you start looking at programming increases, adversity, materials and supplies increases. That's across like the whole district. So that would be in athletics and in classroom materials and supplies. Fuel oil is a big one. We know that that's gone up a lot. Jen does a great job locking in on those energy costs, but nonetheless, we have to prepare for them to go up. And actually, so we have to prepare for them to go up. But Jen, why don't you just tell everybody about the electric work the work on our electric that you've done.
Right. So our electric, everything is going up, but we're lucky we got into the solar farm down on 22. For the next, I think, the main building or Cumberland had 7 years, and the main building's for 10 years. We signed a contract, so we're saving approximately $20,000 a year by getting into the solar farm, which is good for everybody. So it was good we got in when we could.
And that company's going to be building a couple more projects here in the area. So that was Delaware River Solar, right?
Yeah.
health insurance increases. So when you go back 2 years before, not only do we have a terrible budget run, I think there was $45,000 increase. This year we're looking at $1.something million increase just in state aid. And our health insurance was really through the roof. So it was really devastating to the school district, and now we're getting back to being fully staffed and be able to do more things with some of the funds for our programming. BOCES increases, so some of that's just built-in BOCES increases. Good news there too is our BOCES aid is up. I'm going to say up significantly. I think it's been up about 10% over the last couple of years. So 10% on big numbers is a big return. So getting 70 cents back on a dollar for our BOCES services and our coasters is good. I think previously it was about 54%. So that's a good number. But we also have increases there for more services for BOCES. One thing that we have budgeted for that doesn't that may happen is BOCES is having a coaster for trainers, athletic trainers, and we may be subscribing to that for any injuries that happen on the field or preventative work with our kids. And just a random new coaster that's coming out, which is low cost, but would be nice to see from a safety standpoint. And then Jen, why don't you go over the last couple, the bus purchases and
Yep.
band.
Yeah, so the bus purchases went up because we had 3 buses last year, and we're getting 4 this year. So that's why the increase is there. And then the debt service, it was minimal because we've kind of plateaued, which is a good thing. Our debt to aid ratio is good, which is exactly where it should be. We haven't had any added debt, so no added aid. And the reason why you see that 24-25 question mark is because we're hoping to start a project in that year. That's how we're going to hope. So.
Jen, real quick, to clarify, the bus, based on the plan that was given to us, we alternate every other year's 3, 4, 3, 4. So that's how
That's
it
what
happens. Just so
Yeah, the only time we deviated from that plan was when we had a lot of field trips. We had a lot of action with our buses. So we had more mileage on them, but you're right, we had a study done, and that's been the recommendation. Any other questions on the multi-year forecast? Okay. This is an interesting slide too. It's always up here, but the pie changes. And just a couple years ago, the local share was like 52%, the state share was like 46%, and it kept growing. The number just kept creeping, more local share. The blue piece, the other resources for revenue, that number's increased too, which has been nice. That's all the things we just talked about. But now we're seeing the state actually cover more than half compared to us. That's the first time we've seen that. So, and that number should grow next year. So that's promising news. It's promising news for sure. So some supports. So these are the supports that are going to be built into our budget. I think over on the right, you see some kids ice fishing. Nick Pepe took some kids ice fishing. It's been told to me they had a terrific time, although they may not have caught any fish. I'm glad he took them out there. They learned how to ice fish. So some of our priorities, and there's Lacey May. We'll talk about Lacey May a little bit later today. Our budget priorities are more physical education. We've talked about that here at the board meeting. Middle school health and science. Those are 2 areas where we might need a little more support than what we previously had, but we're still not back up to that science and math staffing level that we were prior to the pandemic and that bad state aid run I mentioned. So certainly we've had a lot of talk around the country. It's not a Beekmantown thing, although it is here as well, but more supports for our whole school, so pre-K through 12. Related to health issues, and that could be related to physical health issues and mental health issues, but total health is the term I think that you're hearing much more often now, because a lot of times your physical health is, there's a clear link between your physical health and your mental health as well. So another great thing we've done over the years is provide youth camps for Beekmantown Youth Commission, through the Beekmantown Youth Commission. We're going to do that, and it was, I think Mr. Marin and Mrs. Buckley were on the board when we took a look or the board leadership, we took a look at if we just provided every student that was in the camps the meals, we'd have enough reimbursements to pay for the bill that we get when all the kids go to camp. So it's usually about $7,000 to $10,000 with the reimbursements from feeding all the kids. That would balance out. So it's a nice little perk. So again, procure the mental health services and associate principals to improve the support for families, teachers, and students. We know that high quality, timely mental health services for BCS students will improve the outcomes. So we're really looking at a three-pronged approach that involves process people and temporary programs. And that's the big key is we don't do a great job at Beekmantown letting go of temporary programs. Like if you do something for 2 years, people are like, no, it can never go away. And maybe it won't, but I just want to put out that's a temporary piece in this three-pronged approach. And essentially what we're looking to do is find some temporary resources through some partners for some mental health clinicians to come in and help when kids are in crisis. And if we have that support in the middle school, high school, and in both elementaries, then we feel we can really work on our process in both buildings to make sure that our kids are having the care before the crisis, not after the crisis. We're really good at de-escalating. We're really good at post-care crisis identification, directing traffic to other mental health supports. What we need to be better at is scheduling kids and maintaining the conversation on mental health strategies for kids so that they can decide to make another choice besides going in crisis. So we're going to work on that, and it's a good work for sure. So you have enough temporary people coming in so we can build the process to help have care before the crisis. But there's no doubt that we need more people as this work has become more intensive, and we'll go through what some of that work looks like. So again, it's a total comprehensive health supports to integrate our services and prioritizing physical and social needs. And you see that, when we rewrote the ELO grant, we really put a premium on just getting kids together, getting kids outside. And I think as much as you hear about the problems in society, I'm really happy that certainly we have, we're always going to have problems that we need to identify. Sorry, the lights went out. Lost my train of thought. We've done a good job of providing kids that outlet for getting back to normal at least. And thanks, Gary. And then, another topic. So maybe a permanent position, and this is kind of unique, and it needs further discussion. But maybe it's providing some adventure-based counseling care here at schools, where you have an adventure-based counselor who might be going in to a classroom or a grade level and just preset kids and activate them for learning, but then also take kids or grade levels out for adventure-based counseling or adventure-based just physical care, and work on those strategies and communication skills and those understandings that we may be lacking. So it's a pretty unique idea, but I think people can get behind the idea of adventure-based counseling. When I know you're new to 6th grade, but I know the 6th grade has historically taken, maybe just more than 6th grade, but they historically take kids out for adventure-based team building. I think maybe 8th grade has done that as well. So we're looking to make that more of a permanent piece here at Beekmantown. We're also looking at, maybe it's not on here, but we're also looking at maybe having more therapy dogs. And here's one of the real issues. Everybody has to understand this, because this is all theory, right? This is incoming money, we know that's real, and we got to create theory behind how we're going to spend that. But then the reality is you got to go find the people. And there's not a school district, and there's not a human health services entity that doesn't want to hire counselors. So if you're a counselor and you want a job, you have a job right now, right? So there's not 15 counselors in Clinton County waiting for the posting where they can finally get their job. That's not a reality. So finding great people to do this really challenging work is going to be hard, but we do have some resources here that certainly help, and Lacey Mace is one So more supports. So I've mentioned before, nursing aides. Our nurses are stretched, like everybody's stretched. There's no doubt about it. There's just more regulations. So we've tested on our own just since kind of the mask mandate lifted. We said, the reopening committee said, hey, maybe we can test kids a couple times here if they're sick and they're showing symptoms. So we've tested almost 1,000 students here at school, outside of just your run-of-the-mill everyday nursing duties. And Nick, I know you sent me the number, but how many kids have been positive out of the almost 1,900 something tests? Six. So that's a really, it's good work, but it's a great number too. So we're going to remain with the 3 security hall safety officers. 1 is on a grant from the county, and 2, we just reallocated money in a different way. But that was a couple years ago. Integrated co-teaching services. So another resource for teachers. So a lot of teachers are integrated co-teachers. That might be a room that has a number of maybe 2 or 3 or more, 4 or more IEP students. I'm not trying to downplay any number there. So it could be 10 kids in a room, and you have 2 teachers and 10 kids in a room that have an IEP. And it's really interesting to watch that. So some teachers just click automatically, and some people just know how to co-teach, and some people don't, because you don't learn how to co-teach in your college program. You just don't. So how do we help those teachers maximize having 2 humans in that room? That is probably more. I don't know. You can't say every one of those rooms is more challenging. You certainly can't say that, but there are times when every room is challenging. And if you have 2 adults that have a system of supports and another person helping them, coaching them along the way throughout the district, that could be very beneficial. Middle school student supports, we could, and the specific there is, besides some other sports that I've already kind of mentioned, the high school has implemented effectively Thrive and the Learning Center this year. And Duffy will correct me because if I'm wrong, but I think this year we implemented the Learning Center, and next year we're going to implement Thrive. Right? Thumbs up. Thanks, Duffy. More elementary administrative support. Now, we've talked about this here before. And so last year, the board was terrific. I did mention the need to, what I thought, both schools should have an assistant principal. And you look at all other schools, almost all other schools are smaller than our elementary schools. So our elementary schools are 500 or more students. There's a lot of districts in our BOCES that don't have 500 total students in their district, and they may have an elementary principal, a high school principal, a superintendent, and some other supports. I really believe that we really need to start thinking about having 2 administrators, associate principal in each building, and we can have that discussion. But those are outlined in the budget. We do have smaller class sizes, really small class sizes. Somebody can yell at me and say, hey, there's a class size of 25. I'd say, right, there is a class size of 25. And in that grade level, the average in New York State is 24. So that is bigger than the average. But that is the one class size from 5th grade below. So we want to maintain small class sizes. We need some intervention teachers to get back to a pre-pandemic level. Mental health supports, I won't go through that again. Very similar to what I talked about. ME2 increases, we've talked about that right at the last board meeting that we talked about the ME2. ME2 is a program, we ran it today actually, over at EES. So that's managing, am I going to say this right? Managing and expressing your emotions. Thank you. So having increases there because we have more people offering that to our kids. We have more people willing to do that work for our kids. It's a good program to, again, teach those kids how to manage their emotions as opposed to being reactive. So something we put in years ago, and it's really starting to get traction. There's in the adoption today, there's a cybersecurity document that's pretty robust. We do need to stay on top of cybersecurity. It's a very real thing for districts all around the country. I think we're the gold standard for districts, and maybe in New York, certainly in upstate New York. And So we want to have a budget line for cybersecurity, having the latest and greatest so that our information is secure. So secretarial supports are needed, and a big one, again, this is a find the right person, but a head night custodian to help our newer custodians who are on the night shift, make sure that that there's cleaning happening or effective cleaning happening. Right now, we have one supervisor from 6 in the morning to 11 at night, later than that, 11 at night, yeah. So having a head night custodian will be of value, but we're having a hard time finding custodians. And then gotta mention the true up here, so Jen, make sure I don't forget that. Back to the high schools, science and math, family and consumer science was we were never able to locate that teacher last year. The one we wanted to call back. She landed in a spot that she's comfortable in. I've already talked about OC, special education teachers, reading intervention, French. We're still struggling with French. Thrive, the Learning Center. So built into this budget as well, and not a temporary grant funded piece, but a piece that would be built into the budget would be those college credits for kids. So that wouldn't be, hey, that's great as long as we can get the grant again, that grant in particular is to fill learning loss. That grant goes away in a year or two. Build it into the budget and make sure that kids at Beekmantown have their college credits classes paid for. We might have parents put a little skin in the game there, right? So that they're just not paying for it, but they're not taking the class serious, because that can happen from time to time. But nonetheless, it'd be super affordable if not free. CVS classes and the free reduced lunch breakfast. So before we go to the next page, it must have got deleted, and I'm sorry. There's one other piece in here that's very unique. It's something we've never put into a budget before. It just usually goes right into negotiations. But we're going to talk about turnover, district-wide turnover later today, and additional items to discuss. And we know the numbers, we look at the numbers. But one of the reasons why we have turnover in a couple of areas, like our aides, custodians, and a couple other areas, is because we're paying them the minimum wage. So we were paying a very competitive rate, but as the minimum wage jumped pretty drastically, and negotiation rates, they would jump 3 or 3.5%, or they'd stay with the minimum wage. We have a lot of people making the minimum wage right now, but you can go to all these and make $15, $50, $18 an hour. You can go. Well, Jen says it pretty well. She says I can pay you $12.80 to clean all the places that are not really pleasant to clean, or you can go make $16 an hour serving coffee. Right? A lot of people choose the $16 an hour. So we're looking we've worked with the union, and we're looking to bring up our lowest paid employees to that competitive rate of $15 an hour. So that impacts almost 80% of our support staff, but it does make us competitive. Certainly we get great benefits, but benefits don't mean as much to people as they used to. So we'll talk about that turnover later today, I promise.
And next is capital outlay. I know we've talked about this a lot, but the $100,000 project, we're going to be doing the portable bathrooms for the outside events, and then a few BDS doors as well. And I know it's kind of funny, like why are you throwing in the BDS doors? Those actually make the project able, okay? Because it has to be within the building. And with this year, we're doing BDS doors this current year. We won't get to them all, so we're hoping to finish up the few that we don't get to into the next year. Just to give you update, they're working on doing a survey for the ground work. You'll see, I think it's in this, the minutes of seeker and everything is going out. We're trying to move as quickly as possible with the state. So we are hoping, I'm not saying it's going to happen, we're hoping that we will have these installed this summer. We're pushing really, really hard. The toilet rooms themselves will be here hopefully by the end of May, I'm told. So we're doing everything we possibly can. Bring Your Car's working really hard to push with New York State to get all of it approved quickly. did have some interested people that want to buy them individually, which we could do as well. But we received roughly 75% back in aid. That's over 5-year amortization. So the 4 buses are needed for sure.
How many buses are in our fleet?
We have over 40 buses. Not all of them are used on a daily basis because we have extra handicap buses in case one were to break down, and we have those buses that have the higher mileage, but we keep around just in case for different things that have to be done. So there's about 40, just a little bit.
And you save some for parts, but
We do.
the 40 count the ones for parts?
We only have I think there's only one right now we're using for parts. I don't think there's any parts left actually. And the rest are all actually running. Yeah. And when we take them off the road. When they're just being used for parts, they're taken off the road.
Sure.
So,
I was just curious, like the rotational frequency.
Yeah.
You know, if you're doing 3 to 4 a year, how old do they get to be?
Yeah. And it's really up here. It's about mileage and the salt. I mean, we replace more gas tanks because they rot out than anything else, and body work. And that's really what kills us up here. It is the body.
In the 103 square mile district, the mileage we can get through, but then when we sell one back, what kind of mileage? They usually have how many miles?
They usually have over 100,000.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we normally. We don't trade anything with less than 100.
And I think generally it's about between 42 and 47 buses. So, I think Mary Blaine was the last person to answer that question. Okay, so cap reserve.
Cap reserve. So this will be another proposition on our ballot. We're asking to put another $600,000 in the capital reserve, up to $600,000. And that, again, we're hoping to do a project. 24-25 is the aim, to at least do some kind of project with getting some more maintenance stuff than probably anything else in that project. But we're looking at that. So that would be set aside. Our current balance right now is a little over $1 million in that reserve. So, and I know the bus garage is definitely in need of repair, replacement. I get there's a lot of decisions to be made what we do there. So, but it is in definite need. That is the highest thing that the architects have talked about, the number one.
So with that, I can flip back to any slide that somebody may have a question on, or just a question in general. Yes.
I'm curious how the thought exchange that you launched, that I think that was new, correct?
Correct.
I'm interested in how that went and how that, like where in the presentation that you shared tonight did some of those priorities of ECAT get represented?
Yeah, good question. So did you see that I sent out the results? Did you go through those results?
Yep, and I saw some of the themes,
Yeah.
but I'm just looking for,
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so the thought exchange, I was familiar with the program before because I had used it with some statewide questioning or surveying. And so when it actually came about because we needed a survey with some of these grants. And we started surveying a lot with COVID, right? We started sending out Google Forms, and this looked like another nice way to it's not really surveying, but you're getting information from people on their opinions, right? So that's the first thing, right? It's not called the research exchange, it's not called the fact exchange, it's called the thought exchange, right? So there's a lot of thoughts out there that may or may not be great thoughts, but it's no matter what, you have a thought, and then people rate like whether they think it's a good thought or not, or do they want to learn more about it. So it's always interesting. So some of the high ones, so I put it on here. One of the high ones was keep up with the Chromebook program, keep up with the breakfast program. That was really high for parents and really high for students. A lot of people said smaller class size. A lot of people said pay the aides more. They said that. That has never been in a budget, and it's only in the budget because we're working with that particular unit, and we believe what we're going to in the budget is an increase for the teachers and everybody else's pay, but we are in negotiations, and we'll be reporting that today too. So that was, but pay the living, which now considered a living wage, right? Pay them more. Mental health supports, counseling, but so counseling is great. And I mentioned if we wanted to hire all the counselors in the world, we wouldn't be able to do that. We put out for 2 counselors already this year, and we had one person in particular that we liked, and he took a job at another school that was hiring a counselor. So, so what are the other things you can do for those mental health support? So we're trying to be creative so that we can fill that hole, and not just say, can't hire counselors, too bad, right? Class size was a big one in there, but that's where the thought didn't match the data. So we have the data on class size. So we want to maintain low class sizes for a number of reasons. Those are big pieces in there. Let me just go through and see what else was big in there. If any of my admin remember. Pre-pandemic staffing levels. That was a big one. Let's get to a fully staffed district. Now that's so hard because it's one thought. You don't get the chance to interview the person that's anonymous. So there's staff right on there that we weren't able to hire, right? But then the aides, as we mentioned, that maybe because we don't pay enough, maybe just because there aren't enough people out there, but we haven't been at a fully staffed aides all year, probably the year before that, probably the year before that. And you guys just interviewed yesterday, right? You found 2 more, but how many are we short, do you think, right now?
Still
Another 3. So we're always out there, always looking. Well, get a fully staffed school was a big one. Interventions is always important to people. And I just think you see a lot in here on the stress of it's the stress that staff, students, teachers, parents are feeling, and trying to find ways to mitigate that or work with them to have just build community at least, and let people know that we're trying at least we're trying, and we've got their back, and we're working on better support. So that permeated throughout the thought exchange. Is there something in there that you saw that was caught your eye?
Not specifically, but I was curious just what the reaction was, and I think if you liked how that tool worked and it's going to become part of how we do this in the future, it might be good to also really emphasize the thoughts that our community generated when we do things like this, so people see like, oh, that's my idea, and it got ranked high enough, and that people need that affirmation to feel like it's worth giving that thought again in the future, that they're validated, and that other people thought their idea was important. So there might need to be like a feedback loop of some kind to the community.
So I did try to close. I appreciate that. I did try to close that loop with two things. One, hopefully people can realize that there's a direct connection. But 2, that report back to them. But one of the pieces I really like, and we looked at it yesterday as an admin team because Crystal Nelson did a thought exchange, and I know we have a meeting tomorrow morning. Mr. Lambert and I have a meeting tomorrow morning on another thought exchange over the website. But there's a really unique page that has, it seems like sometimes people go, it's kind of like Democrats or Republicans, right? People go in school with thoughts, right? So like, it could be taxes versus spending, whatever. But they have a Venn diagram where they overlap and where there's commonality of the thoughts, where everybody agrees on like 6 things. That's a cool page with information, which I'm not sure if it was in the report or not, but I think shared out. One of the things I do worry about is that, again, it is the thought exchange, and the more you talk about just a thought, you don't have it backed up with information and data and research, it could become a bit of a red herring or an albatross that you have to wrestle with. So I did worry about some of that, but it's like that's not part of the budget. Like here's a great idea. Great idea. We've been working on it in the operations committee, right? The progressive playgrounds for all kids. That's not, we can't just go say, hey, let's spend $100,000 and put all this stuff in for a playground. That has to go through state ed. That has to go through, we've got to anchor the stuff into the ground. And you need architect and engineering. So it's a great idea. just can't do that. And I tried to put a note. I did put a note in there. Hopefully, if you clicked on, if people said, "Hey, well, let's get the information on this," that note was in there for me. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna, going back to the classroom size, I have thoughts that I think we might see data on in the future. Just one thing to consider is that while classroom size, like the average or the norm is, the limit, I guess, is 24, that might be doable in a more typical environment, but now that we are kind of in this realm of extreme mental health need and that sort of thing, that those numbers might not be reasonable anymore, and the data might show that in the future. And so I think that's what I've heard people express, like the classroom sizes are too big because of what they're dealing with right now at the moment, as opposed to what they typically deal with. But I'm curious. I agree with you. It has to be done by the data, and you certainly have a number of ways in which you're trying to tackle these new challenges. But I think that's where that comes from.
Yes, I agree with you, and I think what we did, well, I know what we did. I think we shared with you previously different data that was based on the average and based on last year, and now certainly the negotiations committee, and I don't know if we put it in the portal, we'll put it in tomorrow, because it's easily accessible information. We now are well below that average across the board, with the exception of 5th grade at BES. But next year it'll be way below the state average for 5th grade. So I agree with you, because of COVID, because of mental health, we do want to remain small. We do want to have small class sizes. So what we talked about maybe 3 meetings ago or 2 meetings ago, we have better information out now.
But I'm thinking that, I think that's just where people are, that's their state of mind, is why they're suggesting the smaller size. They recognize the need for it. More assistance, more help.
I definitely agree. Yeah, and hopefully that permeates throughout this thing. We're trying to get more assistance, more help. And again, it just isn't like, it can't be, it's going to be, finally we found somebody with these skills, how can we make that help, as opposed to, we want this, because it's got to be nimble and flexible, or you're not going to, just the hiring of the human resources is just not easy. It never was easy, but it's just, they might not be out there. So hopefully that helps. But I agree that and we need to get that information on class sizes to you. I know some people know it, but to you and to others. And we hopefully that number stays small again next year. Other good points or questions? So I just asked you to support our budget. There's a lot of great things for kids in here. There's a lot of good supports for everybody in here. And it's nice to finally be close to being fully funded, and this is what fully funded looks like. So I'm proud of the feedback that we've gotten, whether it's from Thought Exchange, the people sitting behind me, or or the Board of Education. So hopefully we could pass this once again. That's our presentation.
Good job. Is there anyone here for public comment? All right.
Make this one quick. So I sent an email out. There's a trip to Spain coming. So that would come in a little bit by surprise, because we'd already approved it a long time ago, and they canceled it at our because we requested it to, and then they canceled all afterwards due to COVID. So they're back. It looks good. Principal Pizarro's been on top of it. So I wanted to just give an update. And then it could be another item to discuss, but on April 28th, we'll have a board meeting to pass the BOCES budget. We could put anything else on that board meeting if we need to have more information. A lot of times we've done either. We've either had another full board meeting, or we've just had a quick pass the budget. And we're done.
Here?
So we usually have it in my office, but it's quick. If we want to have a quick one, but if we want to have one with more information and more discussion, then we just have it like here.
And typically it's like 5 minutes. Because we.
You have to drive.
we-
It's longer than a
Well,
meeting.
because typically, if you have any questions, you can address that by email ahead of time. And then just,
Brian, people use it with coffee and bagels too. And my last thing is, and I don't want to steal Riley's thunder, but our fourth grade students, hopefully y'all saw this, our fourth grade students published a book, which they were super excited about with our good friend Lacey May. And so I'll stop just knowing that Riley's going to hit that one out of the park. Okay? Great book. So I have the book. Oh, so we're ordering more books because they were high demand. They
Yeah.
might be tracking on Amazon now. And the kids are excited that these are going to go in their libraries. All the libraries here at Beekmantown are going to have this book, and we're going to make sure that the board members should get a copy. I know some of you already have a copy. Every board member gets a copy. It's good stuff. That's it.
I presented everything I have to present.
yeah, all right. All right.
Yay, Jen.
This one, you're up. Yes, you're up.
Alright. So I'll start off with the high school. As you all know, we're entering the fourth quarter, and everybody's gearing towards Regents and AP exams. So those are coming up. AP exams should be, majority of them, if not all of them, should be next month in May. And then, of course, Regents have been confirmed that they're on like a normal year. So with that, as usual, teachers are hosting after-school Regents and AP exam prep. A lot of the after-school prep is geared towards the Regents mastery stuff because there's opportunities to regain mastery on your diploma if you didn't hit the mastery level in previous years or just COVID or something. This month alone, April, there's 16 new ELO opportunities, and then one of them is the Model UN trip to Dalton in New York City. So that's a new one. We've never done Dalton before. That's reference to the Dalton School, which is a private high school in New York City. We normally compete against those kids at Harvard. We do pretty well against them. So I think it's going to be more of an entry level. It's kind of like North Country Mile event. I think it's only a day long, so it's not like Harvard, but it's really good because everybody that participated in North Country is going to be able to go. It's not like Harvard where you have to try out the team. It's everybody that has participated in a previous Monument Conference is here. So the high school commenced the last week, 4 days of guest speakers during lunch periods and opposite lunch periods to bring awareness around vital topics of healthy relationships and internet safety. Presentations gave all students the ability to immerse themselves and reflect within their current involvement and practices within both of those. High school is conducting the third quarter ice cream social on the 14th, and that celebrates students who have had no unexcused absences and are passing all their classes with no referrals. There are no disciplinary referrals. And we're finalizing the numbers since fourth quarter just began, so everything's still going on. Last quarter, there were 179 students that achieved that, which is fairly good considering you're required to have absolutely zero unexcused absences. Top 10% for class of 2022, I think I am. Yep, pretty good. So normally there's a top 10% ceremony countywide, but that's not happening because they shut that down. So very thankfully the school is picking up the slack on that. So top 10%, that means top 10% of total GPAs for the graduating class. So all those students are being celebrated Tuesday, May 24th, in the high school gym here at the high school gym at a top 10% ceremony. So that should be, I believe it's 13 students. The class is roughly 137, in between 130 and 140. Eclipse Conroy, Jordan Cook, Zachary Dubray, Dakota Finley, Rocky Golden, Jacob Judge, Randall Fountain, Nathaniel Sarno, Margaret LaVarge, Bradley Lockman, Brendan Mulvaney, Ethan Tisdale, and Riley Whalen are those students.
Brian, can I just pipe in for a second? That's a great event if the board members want to go to it. It's a wonderful celebration. It's relatively quick. Matt Bazzato does a great job with that, and you probably has been on your radar for a year or two because of COVID, but it's one to go to.
Yeah, I have that exact date, Tuesday, May 24th at 6:30 p.m. in the high school gym. Moving on to middle school, noting their spring fling, which was pretty successful for approximately 250 kids. And of course, all students had a huge amount of fun at that. I never had a middle school dance, so I'm very glad that middle school is doing some sort of dance. 10th period homework lab with Associate Principal Manchester and Principal Nelson is going quite well. There were 10 students who attend on Mondays and Wednesdays and receive homework help and catch up on missing work. The 8th graders went to CV Tech last week to explore the opportunities available to them as they look ahead into high school. Some of the students are headed to local manufacturers tomorrow to tour the facilities of the Development Corporation. The purpose of this trip is to raise student awareness of the STEM opportunities in the local area. The National Junior Honor Society induction ceremony is going to be held on May 9th in the gym. There are 167 middle school students who are in high honor roll and 97 who are in honor roll for the third quarter. And that includes the middle school. Main building elementary. The main building elementary is very decorated, prepared for Easter. And also April ELOs are in full swing. Rainbow Looms, Running Club, indoor and outdoor games, yarn weaving, feathered friends, Lego Club, and Mother's Day crafting are all some of the upcoming ELOs. They are quite thrilled about the offerings in May as well. There's going to be much to come, roughly 12 in May. The Kindness Club wrapped up their March Club with an incredible food donation to the town of Beekmantown. We've enjoyed our virtual Eagle Pride assemblies and are now planning on having in-person ones in May and June. New York State testing for ELA took place last week of March. Students in grades 3, 4, 5 worked diligently throughout the state test, and the math exam will be at the end of April. The elementary library does study on the Iditarod. Students tracked the mushers, it's the dog sled race in Alaska, and even had their own event where they competed with their tabletop sleds and various obstacles in the third grade. Cumberland Head Elementary. Cumberland Head had a door decorating contest last month. The contest was organized by the student council. Each classroom decorated their door based on a children's book. Examples of the books included Because of Winn-Dixie, 101 Dalmatians, Harry Potter, the BFG, and Pete the Cat. When the contest was first announced, only the winners would receive copies of the book for each student in the room, but since so many doors were so impressive, all classrooms were able to get a copy of the chosen book for each student in the classroom. Grant funds were used to purchase the books for all students. The first grade was the grand prize winner. We'll have a pizza party. The student council was responsible for announcing the contest, creating reminders, and coming up with a fair way to judge the winning door. Everyone did a wonderful job of that. And this is a section on the book. Cumberland Head Elementary School was featured in the Press Republican over the weekend. There was a wonderful article about the fourth grade writing project about Lacey May, our school therapy and facilities dog. Fourth graders started a writing project back in December where each was asked to write and create a story about an adventure with Lacey May. Though through ELO, students were able to work with a local publishing company to have the books published. Students learned the book publishing process through a virtual field trip with Northeast Group. Students gathered in gymnasium for the book release. Superintendent Mannix addressed the students, congratulating them on the completion of the project, and all students received a copy of the book and the Lacey May bracelet. The PTO hosted an extravaganza play on the word egg at Cumberland Head today. Classroom signed up, this was, I believe, the 6th, was it? Sunday. Classroom signed up for a time slot to meet PTO volunteers from on for an egg hunt. Each child in the school was able to collect 10 eggs stuffed with goodies. Students were also able to decorate their own egg collection bags supplied by the PTO. And Cumberland Head is extremely grateful for the opportunity. Holding it during the day gave all students the opportunity to attend. That's all I have for paper report.
It should be noted, there was a middle school door contest, and I won. That is true, thank you.
What was your theme?
Clayton Community College, it was through CFPS, College for Every Student, and so each advisory got to choose a college, and we were lucky to get a local college, and our kids were making videos, creating a QR code to scan, and posting that in the middle of the door, so that our principal could come around and watch, their videos. It was amazing.
Very
Bill definitely put lights all over his door. It was more of a
Very
teacher
good.
competition.
Nice. All right. Next section is your reports.
Okay, Hall of Fame. So we had a very productive Hall of Fame meeting last week. Sorry, I don't have the date right in front of me. But we did decide as a committee that we're not going to do a spring meal banquet. So again, in the fall, just a reminder, the first inductees, we did a ceremony at the homecoming weekend, and it was very well attended and received, but we had been planning to do school tours and a meal and a formal ceremony. And our hope was to roll that over into spring, and I think just timing-wise and volunteer-wise, we don't have enough opportunities to do that. All of the people from the first class will be invited to the second in the fall, and so we will do the same thing for the first class as we will for the second class. And that will be homecoming weekend. We have nominees in, and the Hall of Fame committee will be discussing the nominees and voting on that. I don't have the date for me. May, sometime in May.
Did you pick the date?
Yes, it's in the bylaws.
Okay.
So yes.
Get that up.
Yeah, so we'll work on that. So people will have advanced knowledge when that second class is chosen, but it's very exciting, and we have some great people who have been nominated by the community, so excited for that. I think I would be a bad bookie or gambler. I'm still pushing the raffle. The raffle is going to happen before the close of the year. Again, this was the Hall of Fame fundraising platform. So we definitely will be closing that out at the end of the year, but we still have some tickets left. And I'm just going to give everybody a little inside knowledge. This is the bad bookie part. We are still trying to reach a certain number to break even. Okay, so your odds are really good of winning if you buy it. Tell your friends.
Payouts stay the same, there's less people in the pool.
Yes. And we're going to come up with a new fundraising platform next year.
Yeah, sounds like it.
I think that's all I have for Hall of Fame committee. While I'm on a roll, I just wanted to mention reopening. We had mentioned last month we had a very productive in-person reopening meeting, and we had elected to defer a few things, approximately 2 weeks, just to see what was happening with students having the option to wear a mask or not in school. And so committee has been still working together through email chain and voting on things like changing the transportation drop-off and rapid testing with the nursing and approving the middle school dance. I think what other things? Changing the seating capacities, the limitation. We all, I think the whole committee's been on the same page about just trying to get kids doing what kids enjoy, and it looks like they're doing it safely with the mask optional. As Mr. Pepe mentioned recently, still very low positivity rates here in school. So thank you all for your hard work on that. And that's all I got.
Very good, very well. All right, so next one is the negotiations. Jeremy and I met last week with our district attorney, and so we met with the mediator at BOCES, and the BTA had their representation there. It was the way the process works is it's a mediator, and he goes back and forth and helps both sides communicate, right? So questions, there were several questions on both sides. There was some data presented. I'll go over that in executive session in more detail, but I think it seems like we got information across both ways. We listened to some thoughts. And we presented some information. There's some questions that they had on hours spent in particular. Like the state requires that you have to have so many hours for students per year, right? So that data was presented. One of them was elementary, 900 minimum, and we were 900.53, but then there was some discrepancy. Thought it might be 904 or 7. So it was some difference of about 1.7 minutes a day or something. Anyway, but we're above the state requirements, but just barely. Then we also looked at class sizes, because those were the questions, right? And so we had some data, like the ones that were presented by Dan before, and Dan got an update that those can change from month to month depending on the kids. And so the conversation was of what the ask is and where we're at. Luckily, we're doing really well with class sizes, right? Some of the classes have a little higher, but they have 2 people in them. I think there's, like Dan said, there's one that is not quite as low as the other ones, but we're certainly well below the contractual requirement. There is, just to clarify, there is a preferred number in the contract, which makes sense to try to have the best education possible. So we're working with all those.
And we're well below the preferred number.
Yes. Well below. But it's coincidental in that there was some feedback of reaffirmation of the mental health need, the support for the staff working here with helping students. So it kind of coincides with what we've been talking about in the last board meeting, with bringing in more staff, looking at what's needed for this current situation in education. So that, I think, matched and was well received. I think most likely. Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
Summed it up.
Okay. So we'll go over some of the details in executive session. Any questions on it?
No, I don't have a question. I was just, before we moved on, I know technology committee isn't listed here, but I want to give an update on that.
Oh.
So.
Yeah.
But I don't want to steal your thunder. Any questions?
No.
All right. I just wanted to tell you all that the technology committee has been working hard, and the draft technology plan's almost ready for board review. So that's going to come out soon for you all to get a peek at. We had chosen a vendor for the website, final site, and we have a kickoff meeting April 25th with the onboarding process with them, which is fantastic. That's super exciting. And talking about Thought Exchange, there was a discussion about using that platform to gather insights from staff and students in the community on what needs for the website and ensure that the new design captures what we all want. So that's my update.
Did you get an update on this stuff?
On the what stuff?
I think the committee's been focused on the tech plan that has to be submitted to the state.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know Gary and Rick have been focused on both the NIST and
I don't.
And in the board portal is our cybersecurity plan.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I knew that was coming on the agenda, so okay.
Yeah. Just we talked a little bit about the update on the plan. Just
strong to, so like our servers are what they use at
Pentagon.
the Pentagon.
The infrastructure that we will have as a result of this infrastructure project is the very same vendor that the Pentagon uses to protect the nation's military. Kind of exciting.
Good.
So if the Pentagon gets hacked, we're in trouble.
All right. Any questions on any of the committee? All right. Minutes. Resolved that the superintendent of schools request the Board of Education approve the following minutes. I know, well, we'll talk about that. Motion?
Motion, sure.
And second?
Second, Courtney.
Courtney? All right, discussion, there was some.
Yeah, so I just had a point of clarification. Chelsea, thank you very much for checking on that for me. During Mr. Manny's presentation, I was under, and this may be my own notes, I was under the impression that when he was presenting, I thought he meant that, so the young specialists for the intensive family and school support program, I thought it was already present in the middle school and it was getting expanded into the elementary.
So we have, I'm looking at my, we've contracted with them for 2 people, but
Yes.
they have only been able, as I understand, to be able to source 1.
Okay.
And that person is servicing, we know, off the top of your head.
Elementary. Okay.
Servicing elementary.
So I might have just misunderstood. Okay, thank you.
The goal is to have
Was to have 2.
both.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right. Next one. Resolve the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education to approve the CPSC and 504 recommendations dated 4/12/22. Motion? Nicole?
I'll second. Cheryl.
Cheryl? Discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Personnel, consent agenda. Resolved that the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education that the following resolutions on the consent agenda, resignations, appointments, and retirement be and are hereby approved. Motion, please.
Motion, Patty.
Patty. Second.
Second, Jeremy.
All right. Discussion. Just one. Dan, could you clarify a little bit of the addendum?
What?
The addendum. So that we have here.
Instructional substitute.
Yeah, instructional substance. So that was just on the table here.
That's not.
No. It's MOA and, oh, that's what the miscellaneous. No, never mind. Okay, we'll cover that. Sure. Any other discussions on this? Liz? All in, oh, go
No, I
ahead.
was just gonna say, I just have a comment that some of the stuff we talked about is grant funded, what was from some of that money that's already come in.
Absolutely.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Page 7. Miscellaneous. Resolved that the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education that the following resolutions on this consent agenda: MOA, Beekmantown Administrators Association, MOA for ELT, athletic mergers, and cybersecurity response plan, be and are hereby approved. Motion, please.
I'll motion, Kim.
Kim?
I'll second, Cheryl.
Okay. All right, discussion. Anybody have any questions on this? If not, we'll have to. Go ahead, clarify a little bit on
Yes.
this.
So historically, we've always had people who are doing the kind of behind the scenes or the administrative work for ELO receive compensation to So, so we didn't have an agreement for the work this year that they were doing, so that's why they're here. So when we had, and maybe you're talking about this, Ed, when we had the agenda setting, we had talked about the payroll clerk, but not the treasurer. So we added the treasurer. So like I do work on this, Jen does work on this, other folks do work on this. And sometimes you do work on this during the day, and that's just, you're just getting paid your paycheck during the day. It was more the work that you do outside of your day, and being on call for like emergencies and all the other things that can happen during the day. And then some people will so that other folks have the ability to just get the grant monies and go and be an educator on a grant or be a chaperone on a grant, which would be outside of these side letters. That is your question.
Yep. No, perfect. This is already in the agenda, but it was a separate document, so I want to make sure there's some clarification. I have questions. Anything else? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right. Financial. Resolve that the Superintendent of Schools requests the Board of Education the following resolutions on this consent agenda: transfers, adoption of 2022-23 proposed budget and 2022-23 proposed tax report card be and are hereby approved. Motion.
All motion. Kim?
Kim?
I'll second. Crystal.
Crystal? All right. Any questions on this financial statement? Covered a lot of that already. Roll call, please.
Douglas Beebe,
Yes.
Jeremy Connor,
Yes.
Kimberly Erlen,
Yes.
Patty LaFleur,
Yes.
Cheryl McKenzie,
Yes.
Ed Merrick,
Yes.
Courtney Miller,
Yes.
Crystal Palmer,
Yes.
Nicole Before.
Yes.
Great. Motion passes. All right. Now we're going to secret. Secret. So secret 2022 annual outlay project. Whereas the Board of Education, Beekmantown School District Board has considered the impacts to the environment of the following scope of work to be completed.
I motion to move the list.
Motion. Crystal. Second.
Second, Chairman.
Jeremy. Roll call, please.
Douglas Beebe,
Yes.
Jeremy Connor,
Yes.
Kimberly Erlen,
Yes.
Patty LaFleur,
Yes.
Cheryl McKenzie,
Yes.
Ed Merrick,
Yes.
Courtney Miller,
Yes.
Crystal Palmer,
Yes.
Great. Additional items to discuss. We have the annual budget vote, which we talked about already.
Yeah, we could just set the time if you want on that. You think, sorry, you want the real question that's usually posed right now is, do we want more information on the budget, or our budget, not the BOCES budget, or do we want to do an early morning, past that, and that's the only item?
Is that the same morning, April 28th, that we're doing the audit committee?
I don't know.
Sometimes it hasn't paired up.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I don't have my
Check. Yeah,
date book with me.
It-
no, it's the day before. The audit committee is the day before,
Okay.
27th.
Thank you.
So this, the reason it's the 28th is because everybody in the region does it the same.
You got to
Same
do
day.
it, have to do that.
Oh,
Same day, same time.
yeah.
If you guys wanted to change the other one, put it as a reason. But we don't have a choice as to the day. So, do you guys have a preference as to what time, the morning, afternoon?
We got it.
Schools.
Not everybody has to be there, as long as we have
Yeah,
a
I
quorum.
can't do it
As
during
long
the
as
day.
quorum.
So we thought at like 7:15 or 7, we can do it really early if that helps.
I can't do mornings.
Okay.
I'm not available between 8:30 and 1 that day, but I could do early.
On the 28th?
On the 28th, if you look at what. If you have any questions on this, look at the information from today's budget information for BOCES. Just send me notes and we'll ask questions.
You would be in Dan's office.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that, the one, the conference room, right next to that.
Conference room, right.
Okay.
If there's an option to attend remotely, I can do that.
I think that might still exist, we'll check.
Okay.
We have to advertise it that way, we can check for it.
The next one is the veterans tax benefit. All right.
I'm ready.
So you handed out some information.
Yep, so I handed out everybody a folder. So in your folder on the right-hand side, the actual bill, which is S1199, and it's a lot of reading, but basically it's just the bill that was passed that said that there could be school tax exemptions for veterans, but it was actually up to the school body to decide if they wanted to do that for their district or not.
Right.
And so they're leaving it to that. They've had a couple bills in the Senate to try to pass it that the government of New York would pay the schools back or reimburse them, but it's failed like 3 times. And I can tell you it's not really high on their agendas. So like Dan Stack or Billy Jones, they have other things like farmers they're worried about and stuff like that. I did include your voices in government, if anybody wants to email them and everything. And I did find some stuff, Chelsea helped me. I went back to 2014 and I looked at the next 5 or 6 years, all the meetings that you had for the board. And on 2/25/14, Mr. Mannix stated he'd like to recognize those who served our country. If the school district provided exemptions on school taxes, then the taxes would be reallocated to certain groups and exemptions to others. It was tabled until the summer. I'm taking it the summer. This was 2/25/14. I looked through the rest of the board minutes for that year, and there was nothing stated for the summer. We did a control F to search, and I just put in veterans, so it actually brought up stuff for it. 2015, there was nothing. 2016, the minutes were a little different from the other ones, and I couldn't access them at all. In 2017, there were nothing. 2018, they actually went month to month, where prior to that, when you looked at the minutes, it was all one document. So if you did a search, it brought you right to there. Otherwise, I would have had to go month to month to do my search, and I quit there and stuff. So I put in some information that you can read and stuff about it being the school board choice. There are 4 schools that do it. In Clinton County, it's Sable Valley, Northern Adirondack, the Plattsburgh High Schools, and Altona do it. So, but again, it's just for reading. I called the Veterans Board and I called Martine at Real Property, and there's 711 veterans in the town of Beekmantown right now. 711 and stuff. So, I also did do a veterans school tax exemption facts and questions. All right, so you can read it. It explains about it and everything. Yeah, Mr. Mannix.
When you were doing your research, did you come across? We had surveyed the community back. Must have been 13 or 14. We had that information. We presented that at a board meeting. You didn't come across that?
I didn't, and that's when I called Chelsea because I thought that's what they had told me.
Yeah.
And I called Chelsea to find out how to search better rather than just reading straight through. But I didn't find any of that.
I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, that would be great, and I'm giving you the folder so we can put it in there and stuff. So it explains all that. I also put in from Plattsburgh City Schools. I put in their minutes, what the Press Republican had done, just so you can see what they did for their process. so that they talked about it, what the difference was, if what their tax base was, and then if they gave the veterans the exemption, what the difference in the tax base was. So that would give you guys an idea about that and stuff.
We had that information too. We'll take that out.
Yeah, and I looked for it. Like I said, I've been at it for 2 or 3 days, and finally got crazy and called Chelsea and said, okay, I look at another board meeting minutes. I've done 5 years and I've got problems. So hopefully, you can find that and we can see it and stuff. I also found, just so you can read it, alternative veterans tax exemption. So this is it's available to eligible veterans of foreign wars, and it's for veterans that are buying their first house. So if you want to read that, this actually did pass through the Senate and everything. And it explains the reduction of the property's access value, eligibility. There are certain eligibility the veterans has to meet and stuff. So, I am having a Zoom meeting with Senior Planet again, April 18th at 4 p.m. And so we're going to be doing a big Zoom meeting, and we're going to see if Senior Planet will get behind some of the stuff, because I also do things for them, like some of their classes and stuff. And if we could write to like our people in Congress and everything, our voices, to see if why they're not doing some kind of bill to see if they can get it passed that would reimburse all the schools that decide to do this to help their veterans out.
Great. Good information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chelsea.
Any questions for?
Yeah, I have a really dumb question. Patty, is it a complete exemption, or is it a partial reduction?
It's a partial reduction, and if you look at it, it'll show you.
Yeah, is it 15%?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can tell you that it goes from a certain percent up to a higher percent. All 4 schools picked the lower percent, the lowest percent they could.
You mean the highest percent off?
Right. No, the lowest. So
so what's the lowest?
Say they start at 15% and they go to 20. They pick the 15.
So 15% is the lowest percentage off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what they picked. And I called some of the schools just to see, and then the Veterans Office was very helpful and everything. So.
Did you, in your research, did you find anything different in the other lobby avenues from what the ISBA is doing with the legal team for pushing for that with legislation?
Yeah, like I said, I did talk to Billy Jones, Dan Stack, just because I know him from my Senior Planet, and we visited him the year before COVID started. I actually went to Lobby Day in Albany and visited with so many senators and assemblymen and stuff like that. So it was kind of nice to be able to get back in touch with them. But like I said, it's not a high priority, and yeah,
okay.
And I can tell you, in New York State too, there's not a lot in New York State. We have those 4 in Clinton County. Monroe does it. I should have put a list, but there's maybe 4 other schools in the whole state of New York that does it in different counties, and they're closer to New York City.
Great, thanks for the research. All right.
Any more questions?
Any more questions, Anna?
No, not about that. Just another.
Go ahead.
So it's just an additional item thing. I had 2 things. Did I cut you off? Were you
No,
going to say?
no.
Okay.
I'm going to ask if there's any more additional items.
Okay. They're kind of quick. So it's first year being on the board, and it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose and trying to understand how things work here. And and one of the things that we had talked about, and I don't honestly know if this is something that we could just email about, but in the spirit of open meetings and transparency, I'll just put it out there that we had some discussions about when we get comments from the public via email. How do we respond? Should we respond at all? Do we just forward to the superintendent? What's the appropriate procedure? Because we want to acknowledge the community member taking the time to give information to us, but at the same time recognizing the
way the communication should flow and the way to, appropriately resolve concerns, and there's a process for that. And so I drafted a potential letter that kind of gives the bones of a response that I think would be acceptable, but helps give us words to kind of express appreciation that they took the time to give a comment, but doesn't actually commit us to anything other than we're going to share the information to the right people, and we appreciate your, interest in trying to make the school and the district better. So I had copies made. I probably could just email it to you, and I thank Chelsea for printing them out. So I'll hand them out to you guys, and you can look at it. Maybe the words help you, maybe they don't. I don't know. But I just wanted to offer it out there because I felt if I would have had that sooner and thought to have it at the ready, I feel like I could have given better responses to people than, I don't know. I just felt icky about it the last time.
Yeah,
so.
it's a good topic, and I'll give you a little feedback after our last interesting incident. I don't know if you recall my email. I did reach out. I wasn't completely comfortable with the system, right? Because the practice that we've had, you don't respond. It just seems like people put a lot of effort. Now, all the responses we look at internally here.
And we absolutely
right?
do, and I want them to know that, right? We look at them.
But the practice in the past has been not to respond because of information you can't.
You don't want to
commit,
or you don't want to imply.
You can't tell them the real reasons or all complete reasons, all the reasons, right? Just out of protection for personnel. But I wasn't comfortable with the communication system. So I did reach out to the attorneys, and I know that there was a letter that we put out as part of the process, but we did talk about creating, I think, a better standardized method of response, right? So that is in process. Send that out to the email,
I'll just...
And what I'll do is I'll make a note for our next board meeting, or maybe before that, to have some information sent out for everybody to take a look at that we can talk about in more detail.
That'd be great. And it's just, and along the same vein, again, learning as I go, I'm noting things like, oh man, it'd be great if I had this information beforehand, or if I knew what to say in this situation, or what is, what would be an appropriate response in this situation. And I was looking back at the Beekmantown's what every new board member needs to know about governance team operations. Just a great document, but I was curious, is that something that we can consider for updating, for adding, for...
So we house that document, and I think it's a great document. It's a great resource. But it would be wonderful for especially, older and new board members to just go through and be like, we should change this, or let's just add this, like that, put that canned response in.
Yeah.
Feel free to nuance it, but that's a great resource. There's 2 or 3 documents. Those are meant to be resources for everybody.
I would strongly urge at the next, I forget the name of it, but the onboarding of the new board in the summer, that document's reviewed, maybe that's I could even see small groups discussing what's the most concerning part of this, what do we need to, you know what I mean? It would really, I read it when we first started, and then with everything else, I forgot it, and I found it again. I'm like, oh my gosh, this has so many good information, So yeah, but we could update it, and I'd really like to be a part of that.
That was put together. April kind of led the charge on that. She was a previous board member, and it was gathering information that we would get when we do our NISBA board stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of that came from. But it's a good question. Has any of that changed, since the last time we did it? Have you seen a parallel in that versus the NISBA classes you've been having?
I took them right at the beginning, so I'd have to re-reflect on it, but, and it does quote a lot of policy, which is great. It's always perfect to tie to policy, but it'd be great to have little nuggets of, the policy, which talks really high level and very kind of generically says this, here's some more meat, here's some more examples,
Sure.
here's some
It
more.
probably would be good to have some of that information for the public to know what our boundaries are, right?
Yes,
here's
absolutely.
What the law allows us to do, what we can or can't say.
Because they don't know.
They don't.
They really don't.
Yeah, so I think it would be.
Yeah, it's always good to be reflective and see how we can improve.
So how would editing of that happen? Is that something that we...
So house the document, so I guess you just want a board-approved method, like you guys can figure out whether you want to just all read it and send stuff to the clerk. The clerk's a good person to, make any edits and then resubmit it, and then you, on the bottom, we redate it and as a
New revision or whatever.
So it's easy to do.
Change a lot.
I think every, all the policies are reapproved at the reopening meeting in
I see.
July.
So it could be incorporated into that, yeah, because it's not a policy document,
No.
right? It's not,
Board
it's just a
board
supportive,
adopted,
supportive
process.
guidance, yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
I think that would be great to just take another look at that. I know we kind of go through it, or I don't, Joanne or you do, we go through and put the new names of people and the new phone numbers, but the meat that you're looking for, that would be really good.
Sure.
So I have a couple of
All right. Okay, right there.
I'm going to email that to you.
Yeah.
So like you said, we look at everything, and I know there's been items presented to me in an email which are concerning because I don't know where they come from. And I want to know where they come from because we don't just ignore things. So like one of the and I think like the people because when I start asking questions like, hey, we need to gather this information, people who are my employees start saying, where's this coming from? And I don't have good answers. There's as Gary would say, there's something in the force, right? Star Wars fan is. So for instance, the discipline data. Let's just talk about that for a second. Where does that? Because I have data for you, but a part of me would be I think a little foolish just to hand out data not knowing what's driving it, what the discussion is. So let's have that discussion on data related to discipline of students that have been, and I'm going to use a term that wasn't in any email, unruly or worse to adults, right? Right? So I have really good data, a lot of good work went into it across all schools. But, I guess what I'd say is, since my start here, I've been consistently directed to build that culture of making decisions on data, right? Not that culture of my gut tells me this, my instincts, my intuition tells me that, but a process that's informed by data-driven decision making, and we do that. We do that at our level, in our meetings, and we do that in their meetings, and they do that in their meetings. This is really hard and challenging to change that culture. And you know, because you've probably been here the longest, how that culture wasn't here. And the regression back to that is something we constantly battle. And when that gets out of the cage, it's hard to put back in the cage. When we're now working on cocktail party conversations and rumor, innuendo, or anonymous things that I can't say something or there might be retaliation, I would say if that's the problem, fix the retaliation policy. But let's have that continuous improvement framework that we strive to embed the principles of data-driven decisions, that we use these as tools and strategies for impactful information that drive who we are as a district. And we're committed to that. We're committed to that in our reading programs. We're committed to that at Tech. We're flat out committed to that. So we get shaken to the core when we start having discussions that aren't based on the information as we know it. Now it can still be great conversations, and we could learn different ways to look at the data. But this is a mindset that I think helps us better identify the needs within our instructional continuum, which you guys want us to do. This is a practice that helps us drive the budget, which you guys want us to do. These are critical decisions, and the data helps us reflect on this process that you guys want us to do. So hopefully, long as that path of emotional decisions based on rumors, decisions based on anything but concrete information, that we do our best to house and keep or uncover. And we're going to keep striving to do that, and that information helps, and we share that information and helps our views and our opinions on this critical decision-making process. And what's critical is this data that should drive us. So I've got a whole bunch of data, but I do want to know, and I'm going to share it no matter what, but I think it's fair to ask, where does that question come from? Because what's the real concern driving that? And then let's take a look at the data and see if that concern is based on data, or is that concern based on some of these other things that I kind of talked about that we guard against.
So does everybody have a question on discipline information? Data? Anyone?
Where did it come from?
I missed where, I was just going to ask where.
Was that during one of the last meetings?
I think it was an email on, I'd like to see the data on the student discipline issues related to aggressive, I'm paraphrasing, aggressive behavior from students to adults. I think that was when I asked you guys, that was kind of a task, right? Is that right? Okay.
Is that an email that you sent about?
I have no idea what you're even talking about.
I think I
where was that email from?
misunderstood what I was looking
no
for.
idea where this question is coming from.
She might have an answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I sent you an email, Dan, but I think you may have misunderstood what I was looking for.
Okay, what were you looking for?
Well, we had been talking about mental health and the impact of student behavior on the employees as well. And so we were trying to, I thought we were trying to understand not just the toll that mental health is having on our children, but on the employees.
For sure.
And I think I had asked about, has there been a change in the volume of whatever people experience or are calling aggressive behavior towards employees? Because I don't know. So that was my personal question. It wasn't coming from anybody else.
Well, I look at you as a board member.
Yeah,
and I want to, and therefore I want to take that and have that not have a one-on-one.
Yeah.
Because I've served the whole board, and I want to, so I can have that because it's a good question.
That's great. And and I'm still so very new to this board too, so I don't know when and how to ask these questions in an appropriate way. But
it's a good question.
I work with student discipline in my job, so I was curious about the toll that discipline is having on our employees, and if there is a change that is real or perceived, because I am aware that there is a perception that it could be feeling worse right now than it really is. So that was, I guess, where I was coming from.
I think I understood that, but so part of this is we want to make sure that everybody knows where we're coming from, and I wasn't quite sure of that.
Yeah.
But and then I think I did ask you, well, how many years do we want to look back? So let's do 1 year past the pandemic to see how that relates.
Yeah, we look at like what used to be like a normal year.
So here's that.
Well, thank you.
So, good conversation, right? So when you think about this, you think you begin to look at previous conversations or emails that have been sent. Let me walk you through this. So we have 4 years of data on. It's kind of it's easy to find this data because we try to keep things in school tool. That's our instrument. That's a great data warehouse for us. But sometimes some of the messages in school tools get caught in different spots. It goes down into a message and not into maybe a report. But the principals do a really good job of knowing where that information is. But if you take a look at here, the biggest form of student discipline is a superintendent's hearing, right? That's big. Like if you go to a superintendent's hearing, you're looking at having worse outcomes. You're probably now leaning more towards dropping out than your similarly situated peers. The first year I got here, we had, the year before I got here, we had 42 or 46 superintendent hearings. Knives, marijuana, and a lot of that was because it was really inconsistent. You might get 3 days for smoking marijuana, you might get sent out for a whole year for smoking marijuana at school. So we try to be very consistent, we try to be very fair. I got to give all the staff, past and present, adult who's fantastic. Adult is a truly fantastic teacher, but they had a conflict there about no, stay, and he was like, no, I'm going, and so there was a push, and that landed on my desk. So that's on here, but that's that case, okay? So then you take a look at the other schools, and you start with Cumberland Head, and you take a look over the course of years. ISS stands for in-school suspension, right? We have a bunch of acronyms for an education here, and then OSS is kind of its more severe cousin of out-of-school suspension, right? So if you take a look at Cumberland Head, they had maybe more in-school suspensions back before the pandemic, and now I don't know. It's hard. I mean, it's those are good numbers really for 500 and something students, and then we've kind of marked how many of those have happened towards adult. Now we kind of had a chuckle at this, believe it or not, because some of those numbers are like the same person. So we do know that Nick, we kind of made fun of Nick at the faculty meeting or the admin meeting, because Nick sometimes comes in and handles somebody who's out of control. So that might be, it may not be a teacher, but certainly it's an adult in the room. So, but those numbers are 500 kids, 530 kids every single day, and those are the numbers. Those are the best information that we have right there. And there's not a huge difference between out of school and in school, although I find that and I tell the principals all the time, because I'm not running an elementary school, so just take it with a grain of salt. But I find that the out-of-school suspension, it certainly facilitates the parents' interest in resolving this sometimes a little higher level, because now they're on board for monitoring the kid. That's really hard to monitor in school. Okay, that's just my personal opinion. But I don't want to have a whole bunch of out-of-school suspensions. That's not what I'm saying. And then interestingly, these other two numbers are really good numbers. So these are the number of times that students have been brought to instructional support teams or instructional wellness teams. And then a bit is a behavior plan. So how many students actually have a plan that's worked with a collaborative group. It's a shared decision-making process on, we're going to try this to make this kid more successful in school. A lot of times that bit is changing. And these are needed requirements before a kid goes to special education. Or to keep them out of special education, more important, right? And is SP safety plan, sorry, is that support plan, thank you. Okay. So those are numbers that Cumberland had, and they're, it's daily. They're on the go all the time over there to help support kids and keep kids out of the bigger spots like out of school suspension. BES is completely different, but it doesn't align well with the story the narrative, right? So that's an issue. That's a disconnect. I'm not saying there could be that disconnect could happen in a lot of different ways, but the in-school and out-of-school suspensions are lower there than significantly lower to none until this year. So, and then we had one case where it was the one I highlighted some numbers because they stick out to me. Those are the ones that really stick out to me. There's 15 incidents by 2 students, both were in the same room, right? So both were in the same room. So, and we know that those kids did go through a process. They're no longer in that room. That process took time for a while. The process, no matter what, takes time, and it should take time because it's serious work to help keep a kid in the right environment. But that process took longer than anybody would want.
Yeah, that 15 doesn't come from ISS or ISD. It comes out of the IST column.
It could come out of any one of those columns.
Because it didn't.
Yeah. So one student could be in ISS twice, out of school suspension 3 times, and 7 times they had acted out against an adult, right? So, and they have the same. It's interesting. The numbers are similar with the IST and the BIPS. It's interesting over there. Is what it is. And then you have the middle middle school numbers, and then you have the high school numbers.
Well, you would think 19 and 20 and 20 and 21 are going to be skewed because half the kids were at home.
19, so 19, 20, yeah, from March to the end, they were at home, right? So it's about a quarter.
You would think those numbers would be lower, right?
Yeah. And 2021, 2020,
even before with all these COVID cases and all these kids getting stuck at home for no reason whatsoever.
Isolation.
That just knocks down. Ask Mr. Pepe, right? How many kids we have out of school for no reason? Obviously, that's taken down these numbers. Just FYI, you got to take that in consideration.
Yeah, no doubt. That's why you asked for I think that's why you asked for the year before, when everybody was here for the whole year, right?
Right.
And in 2021, we had roughly 70% of the kids in person, majority of the time, although, I hate to say that because then sometimes there's like 100 kids out in quarantine.
Right.
Right? So, you're right, I mean, those numbers should skew down. But so it's an interesting social dialogue. Should they skew down because they weren't here, or should they skew up because they weren't here? Should they skew down because, we were more rigid in cafeterias, or does that create, a lot of people say that the pandemic and all these cascading traumas would take those numbers in 19, 20, 20, from the last 3 years and drive them up.
Well, you have to
But
look
you
at
also
it as a
have lower
percent.
Totally.
Right, as a
Totally.
percent
That's what I'm
of
saying.
And you also have
density.
lower density,
Yeah.
When we talked about classroom size earlier, during those years when a bunch of students were virtual, was the class, and we were reducing density, the class size ratio was down.
Yeah, they're farther apart, and stop touching me and all that other stuff, right? And again, it gets triggered out of that. No doubt about it. These are really good points, and that's why data helps us tell the story. But the root cause, we may never know. The root cause.
So, Mr. Mannix, I don't know if you remember the other question I asked then was also about turnover of staff, and is the perception of turnover related to this data or not? And
What is the perception of that turnover?
well, I think in our country there's a conversation that people are leaving their jobs.
For sure, right? They call it the Great Resignation, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In all kinds of industries. So I'm
No
just
doubt.
wondering,
For all different reasons.
But they're
Oh,
going
yeah.
but they're
Oh,
going
yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah, it's not simple.
Right. So, and so then I asked the question back, well, what do we want to describe as turnover? And I think I took it just myself and said, it can't be called turnover if you retired here, because you never.
Oh,
turned
no.
over.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
So I put together anybody who didn't, I put together, she's getting mad at me because I didn't put together anything. Chelsea put together all this information, and I kind of broke it down a little bit. But we took all the people in every group and everybody who's left, right? Anybody who's left over the last 4 years for any reason. That reason includes retirement. That reason includes resignation, termination, new job, all these different things. And I've gone through and marked ones that I know, and I can just share with you some things that are baked into the data. But taking out all the people who just retired, just saying, you didn't turn over, you retired, right? And we had a couple people who left close to retirement, like one person who lived in Westport left and got another job in their general area in Essex County. And they had a long career here, and they left for whatever reason. They're in here, right? I had people who are in here they're in here 2 or 3 times because they left, come back, left, come back, left, come back. I also have people in here who left to take another job here. So you might have left as a cleaner and then worked in the cafeteria. So they're baked into leaving, okay? We went through this information and, again, factoring out all the people who retired. So Scott Miller was here the other day. He retired. So he's in a different he's in the retired category. So for administration, we averaged a half, so it's kind of a weird way to say this, like teachers, counselors, psychologists over the last 4 years, and this includes, again, people who moved here and didn't work out, people who moved here and got a job in their hometown. And there's a number of scenarios. There's people who were teachers and got an admin job. They're all in it, right? That's around 2.75 teachers leave a year. So not just teachers, sorry, teachers, counselors, psychs leave a year. That's out of 200. So that's about a 1% true turnover ratio. And the way the data looks. TAs, we've lost 1 over 4 years. So now the support staff, that kind of goes to that, making decisions based on data. So I do think we've had a lot of turnover. I don't know if one of the things we're trying to do to fixes it. But it's ironic when you look at the data, right? So 20 in year, let's go 18, 19, 23 support staff members left. So aides, custodians, secretaries, bus drivers don't really leave too much, but monitors. Yeah, a lot of cafeteria monitors, right? That's on that. 23 the first year, 19, 20, 31. 2021, 22 people lost. So it was 23, 31, 22, and this year 31. So, it hovers around 10, and we might be that 31, it's got to climb, because that's like from, last week. Yeah, you probably know somebody who just left today, right? Yep. So, but that average is 27 a year right now. That's a big number, right? So that's a turnover issue that we're trying to address in the budget and otherwise. Confidential, we lost 1 over the 4-year period, and the supervisors have an unblemished record of 0 people have left over the last 4 years. So I do see, it's a good question, and I do see, we do see that challenge, that constant challenge of our support staff. But that's not to say, that's not to say that it's not super challenging, and this environment hasn't presented amazing challenges to everybody. So it's not, this doesn't paint the picture that it's easy, nobody's leaving. We're not saying, they're going to stay anyway. Nobody has that mindset. And I've talked before about, when I was a kid, I remember, just in society, forget Beekmantown, I remember, worrying about a nuclear war because we were next to the base. I grew up like that, and I was worried about it. I remember I was older, and there was the Rodney King riots. I remember that, watching that, riveting. That I remember the O.J. Simpson trial where there was a murder. It was big news back then. But if you take a look, I don't remember a pandemic, right? I don't remember death like you've never seen before. I don't remember being isolated as a health measure. Isolation is what we use to punish inmates, not to reward them. So I talk about these cascading traumas that have happened over 2 years, starting with the pandemic, and you've got it all in there. You've got massive death. You've got riots in every city. You've got a video of people dying, and you've got video of people dying, people taking video of people dying, and how you process that, right? And it goes. You get the threat of nuclear war for the first time in I don't know how many years, and I'm leaving a whole bunch of other things out that can be traumatic and take somebody who has anxiety and really make it difficult. You have just all of us were taught to be super careful about germs and this virus, and you find yourself washing a pineapple for the first time in your life because you're trying to get the virus off it. But then it takes people who had nothing, and then maybe they're still just totally fine. It takes other people who had nothing, and maybe for the first time they have anxiety, or they have COVID issues, or they've lost people that they've lost. So that's Beekmantown. That's society. And it begs the question, what do we do to help that, right? And I think you have to start building that sense. So some of you ask, well, I want to know, what are you thinking about morale, and what are you thinking about burnout? And we think about it all the time. And I think I've said it to the leaders more than once, is let's go on that journey, but we're not going to be the morale shared cooperative journey, a shared decision on what we're all going to try to do to make things better around here. Not give them, how come you'll give us a lunch? How come you'll give us a hot lunch? And then you give them a hot lunch and you get blasted like you've never been blasted before. Like that's not a success strategy. A success strategy is coming together and agreeing to work on items that the collective feels it could help boost, and it might not, but we have to invest in that. And I'm committed to that. And I'm committed to that, and I've told leadership I'm committed to that. And I'll tell it again, and I'm publicly committed to that. A couple items though, sitting in a room and cursing at the darkness isn't a great strategy. But there are places in our school community that they are working to make their interactions with each other more fun, their interactions with each other more engaging. They're working on knowing that they have support with each other. And we just need, that's a great start, right? We certainly need more of that. But what questions do people have about morale or burnout or even the turnover? Or what ideas do people have? Because I know nobody's aced this yet, right? Oh, I gotta throw one other thing out there. Because I've been going to a lot of webinars, and when I go to a conference and they have this as a topic, and this isn't my MO, this isn't what we do here, but there's a lot of places that are saying, we just decided to take a breath as a school district and recenter ourselves, right? And just try to get back to a new normal. And that's easy to say, but the state's not going to do that. We have new standards coming out. We've got cybersecurity we've got to do. We've got a whole bunch of other things that are going to happen whether we want them or not. But when I thought about that for a second as a strategy, I think, well, we do a lot. We've done a lot around here. And I pulled, and I remember something a board member said. They said, I don't have time to read your data on the goals that you guys do, right? So I pulled the data or the goals, and this is like 11 point font, guys. This is the improvement that the board passes, we implement, and people like that, the people and their teachers or business office, they do. I'm part of the do here too, but it's a lot of work and none of it's easy. Change is not easy, and we've done a great job changing. A singular solution besides building that community and working together might be to take a breath on some of the goals for the time being and allow people to recenter and just focus in on some of these things. Instead of putting on a new thing, focus in on the reading program, focus in, take a deeper dive on whatever math program you might be struggling with. So that's something I also present to the board as something we can do. So for instance, I'll open it back up to the board. We had a strategic plan. It was a great idea. The strategic plan was a great idea adopted by the board prior to the pandemic. And we were probably getting tired anyways. But during the pandemic, we didn't have a lot of people going to, and we still don't have a lot of, I should say that, because we have a lot of ELOs going out right now. But it's hard to get people to pull from 4 or 5 different ropes. And it seemed like there was not a lot of momentum behind the strategic plan with people. Not with me, not with Ed, but with the people who need to be part of that. And I would submit to you that maybe we need to just take a year where we take a breath and still know that we got a whole ton of things coming that are going to be important. And work on that community within each school and work on building relationships with each other.
Okay.
Dan, I just had one thought. So I in my day job, I do a lot with metrics and looking at organizations, how they measure success, performance, safety, etc. And the fascinating thing about metrics is that depending on what they're measuring and the incentives for recording them or not can really have an impact on the results.
Yeah.
And so looking at this, these statistics with the superintendent hearings, ISS, OSS, the towards adult column, I think, is the only one that isn't a formal documented, and you require people to report, right, for that?
Well, we're just, I think, that's not something that, so we report all discipline data, and severe discipline or severe violent discipline goes in another category, but not towards adults. So that was kind of a new piece, if that's what you're asking.
Kind of. I guess it's going to sound kind of crazy perhaps, but when I see the toward adult column and with little information I have, just what was shared today, I wonder if where my mind goes, because that's where my work goes, is there incentive for not reporting that? Is there incentive for anyone to not want to convey that information so that you don't have a incentive or maybe our schools compared with these numbers so they want to make sure they look like they're doing a better job? Does it require more resources that someone might want to say, hey, we got to tamp down on reporting these because it makes us look bad? Like, is there any sort of
penalty or something?
Just you could say that.
Let me go through my hunch on that, okay? And then we'll put some my colleagues on the spot here, okay? Which is dangerous work. But people know what's going on in their building, right? They know when a kid's acting out, and I'm pretty sure there's not a lot. Like, we have a school community here, and people will go tell the principal, hey, or counselor, hey, this just happened, or hey, so-and-so needs help down in room 113. So I think people know what's happening, and they do think it is reported. Now, there's not a record anywhere there's no record of towards adults. Like, we just created that. Matt?
I can give a little narrative around that. So we basically write referrals, right? So anytime those happen, we encourage teachers to write referrals. Because it's a paper trail for us to be able to get services in play, right? We want to do a PIN, we want to do a PSAP referral. Those are all important aspects that we need to have in place to be able to get services in place. So we encourage, it's actually opposite. If we have a situation, I tell the teacher, write a referral. So we have the documentation, we have it there. And I look at the narrative. So a lot of that data you're looking at, that's based on the narrative of all the different referrals for those 4 years of students saying something, derogatory language to a teacher. Something happened. That's the narrative that we do. So I think it's the opposite for me. Is I encourage them to write the referrals rather than deter them, because I want to have to feel that. I want to understand where we are so that we can make sure we have the service in play to help those students.
There's a disconnect, and we've talked about it before, and we talked about it in meetings. There's a disconnect sometimes between student behavior and their placement, and how long that process can take for a number of reasons, some of which are completely out of our control. But there's no district don't report that. Is that what you're kind of getting at that?
Well, I'm just asking if that could be a potential situation here.
I hear. So not here. But if it is, that's where I would want to know, right?
Yeah.
That's where we take the deep dive. But for instance, there's every now and then there's kids that have a knife in school, right? And there's a law that says if a knife is so big, you're going to be out of school for up to a year. Like, we measure the knife, and you know what it is? A lot of times it's a kid who works on a farm who's got a pocket knife because they cut the hay bales off or they cut the feed bag, right? And they bring it into school. But that's a serious deal. But I know we take it serious. But but there's a beta report that we could pull too. Every year we submit where we have violent crime on there. And I think I've taken stuff off there before because I'm like, you never told me this was violent crime. What happened? And
injuries related to.
Yeah. So we've had, like, there's more. Back when I was at Hudson Falls, so remember her name, Eve, and you wouldn't believe the power that a second grader, a young kid, can have when they are in massive crisis. What's nice sometimes at the high school and middle school level, they're like, I want to leave, and they'll leave, and they'll go outside. You call the cops, and they're following you, chasing down the road, or chasing them to the woods, which we've done before. But sometimes with a little kid, like, they will headbutt you, and you know, you'll go because you got a broken nose. And we've had an A teacher, so we've got to be careful here, right? But one teacher got hurt pretty significantly in her, I think her rotator cuff or something happened on a kid, and she ended up out on disability. But I think we actually pulled it out last time on this, right? So we've had a page and a half of people that have put their name in for potential disability for workers' comp, and our workers' comp rate is flat. It's our only insurance rate that's flat, right, this year. And they put their name in for workers' comp, but we only lost like 5 days to workers' comp last year, something like that. So we look at that. So that, like, if you had a serious, but people, like, nobody likes getting kicked in the shins, right? And sometimes you're gonna get kicked in the shins. And we don't tolerate it, we hate it, and we want to address it. It does happen.
There was a point in the past, Dan, where there was an update to the board on discipline data. And I don't know if it was because we were modifying administration or whatever, but we have had several reports in the past. Maybe as part of this, we maybe need to start making this a yearly review of how it impacts, well, in general, how it impacts students. So
I'd be interested in that.
I think I hear your comment about the taking a breath, but education changes and evolves. You guys are the experts, and certainly the last 2 years have taught us that it's not stagnant, right? So maybe we should focus on it. If we choose to do a strategic plan, I think we need to have it be not as involved or as cumbersome, more of a listening component. So we have people that know education. We know how it's changing. Maybe we need to have more of a perspective where we have surveys or investigations of what it is that where we are, where we want to go, and what things we need in the middle to happen, and some sort of a plan over time to get there. I don't know what those are. I'm not sitting in those seats. But there's no reason why we can't revisit everything in small chunks that aren't overwhelming that allow us to move forward. So, having said that, why don't we table this conversation about some of this and maybe explore it more depth next board meeting?
Sure. Any other ideas, though, on morale or burnout?
Could do a thought exchange on it.
Well, we did do Principal Nelson, you did your thought exchange on building culture.
Positive climate culture.
Positive climate
How
culture.
we can work together to do that.
I did not do. I was going to do it with her on that, but my thought exchange I know would be Pat, give us a contract. That would be the number one thought. So we're going to wait a little bit on the district one, but we're geared up, ready to go.
So as part of what I'm talking about, the plan that's used at CBS, they have surveys for the staff that include a lot of this question format that allows you to evaluate it every year. You evaluate the feedback every year. You look at what's approved, hasn't changed. You put a plan in place to change that. Sometimes it's just awareness. So that can address your question about morale and anything else. We should start looking at that.
My only other idea is listening sessions because as you mentioned before, like building those relationships is really where, you know, we can put up with a lot of crap if we feel
Right.
valued by the people that we work with. I know that's true in my job. And so I don't know if there's space and time for that already happening, and if not, creating opportunities for people to just be heard, and then we would also be looking at that for themes, you know, what kind of patterns are people bringing up in terms of what's affecting their individual morale, and then how that impacts the overall climate.
Yeah, we see things similarly. Like I definitely think that being heard is a big part of it, and that's part of the reason why we had thought exchange. But the other piece that I think is do you have a network? Do you have people you can rely on? Can you count on people in your foxhole? Like, how do you do that? And how do you build that community, build that culture, right? And part of that community or culture is everybody's listening to you. No, yeah, I mean, because everybody's listening to you, or you know that people are listening to you, right?
Listening and helping, because the question is, do you want people just to listen to you because they agree with you, or because they're willing to help you?
Right. Listening and resources, right? Listening and follow through. Investing in the culture, investing in the listening, right? Active listening.
All right. So let's do this. Let's revisit this conversation in more depth next board meeting and start putting together some plans to move forward, something that's more encompassing with the staff as well.
And thank you for bringing this. I wasn't expecting it, so.
Well, there's a lot of work by a lot of people, and it is good data to reflect on. But one of my points is I'm probably going to ask for more background next time from other people, just so we can narrow it, or because it's good work, and you're welcome. You can do better.
That's great. All right. Any other additional miscellaneous? Anything for public comment? All right. We are going to have an executive session without action afterwards.
Potential action. There's potential action.
Oh, there's potential action. Potential action afterwards. So, we're going to appoint clerk pro temp. So, resolved that the Board of Education appoint Mr. as clerk pro temp for this meeting. Your motion, please.
Go ahead. I'll second.
Okay.
So Kim. Motion.
Yep.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, now. Resolve the Board of Education enter executive session to discuss the employment history of particular person or persons. Anything else on that?
No collective negotiations. Did you want to?
And collective negotiations as well. Motion, please. Nicole.
I'll
Second.
Cheryl.
Cheryl. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, we're in executive session.